Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm your host, Andrew Biggs, and I'm here with my special guest today, Cliff Pittman. Cliff, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Andrew. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you. I'm so excited to dive in and talk shop a little bit. Um, yeah, dude. I mean, it's going to be super fun. For the audience out there, just so you know, Cliff is an ultra marathoner and he's also a coach and a trainer. He runs his own coaching practice, and I'm sure he can tell you a little bit about that later in the show. But one of the biggest things that we were talking about ahead of time, Cliff, and as I've gotten to know you over the past year or so, that it so impresses me is just your commitment to go big. And you were telling me you got a big race coming up on Halloween. I think you said it's 50 miles. And, the first question that comes to mind for me, and I'm sure for some people listening, is what even possesses somebody to want to go run 50 miles? Like, what is this all about, and why run ultra marathons? Like, from your perspective, what's this all about, man? Like, fill us in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody has their own individual answer as to why would I go out and run 50 miles or 100 miles or even maybe a marathon. It's very individual to person. And for me, it's just about the process. I love the process of showing up every day and stretching myself, challenging myself, seeing the growth in that process, monitoring the changes both physiologically, psychologically, and how all that plays out in the training cycle. And then to see basically when I show up at a race, so 50 miles here this Saturday, it's more like I'm taking a victory lap because all the hard work has already been done. Like training is like the hardest aspect, and the 50 miles,
Hmm.
the race is just where it gets to shine. And talk about the process. I'm very much process driven rather than like an outcome goal person. And I think, especially in my space right now within ultra marathon and all running, the people that are process driven are finding themselves to be a lot more consistent in their training because with COVID going on right now, races being canceled, if there's not an outcome to strive towards, then people are just getting lost in the sauce and they're not showing up for themselves because they don't have a big reason. But if we're process thinkers and we're process driven, then it's all about betterment and it's all about getting better in the process so we can continue to show up for ourselves. So this 50 miler this Saturday isn't even a race. I'm literally going to go over here to Kessler Mountain and I'm going to go play. I'm going to go play. It's going to
Hmm.
be 10 hours of playtime. And
Hmm.
it's in place of a race that I had scheduled and that was canceled due to COVID. So
Right.
why? It's just to kind of see what I'm made of. It's to celebrate the growth that I've experienced over the last 6 months that I've trained for this. Um, Probably the best way that I can sum that up is just growth. Growth is why I do it, and there's very few things out there to be more challenging than training for ultra marathons.
Totally. I love what you said about being process oriented instead of results oriented. I see this a lot in business and sales as well. Some people focus on the process, kind of like the leading indicators, we might say, the number of phone calls they have or the number of appointments they have, rather than just the sales figure, or the end result. Whereas other people are much more focused on the result, and sometimes they actually get to the end result without a great process, right? But then it isn't easily duplicated. Um, Talk to us a little bit about like the value of process oriented thinking and what goes into developing a process oriented mindset. I think some people want the results because like that's where the sexiness is. It's like, oh, the result is like this triumphant moment of a big sale or a big business deal or some trophy at the end of a race, in the fitness space. So, but like the process is really where the battle is won. So talk to us a little bit about, how do you go about developing a process oriented mindset?
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that it requires both. I think that we need both uh, goals and outcomes, and then we also need to be focused on process. Without goals, there is no growth whatsoever. So it's good to have that outcome in mind. But you're right. I think it's the priority is to have that process mindset And one of the ways that I develop it is I will set an outcome goal, and then I'll just reverse engineer from there and say, if I'm looking at a race, like physiologically, what is required of me to progress from where I'm at now in point A to develop into what is required of me here in point B. If it's a goal outside of training and racing, I'll do the exact same thing. It's just reverse engineering, understanding what type of workload and what work rate goes into that goal, and then just falling in love with it. We can reframe our thoughts. We can get whatever emotions we want to have around that process, um, and just being very intentional about developing a mindset that embraces the process. Some people might call it the grind, celebrating wins along the way. And really, what it comes down to is having control. And so we can control the process, we can control the work that we put into it, we can control our attitudes. We can control our perspective. We can control all of these internal factors. Well, outcomes are influenced by internal actions and behaviors, but outcomes are still very much an external thing. And if our sole
Mm-hmm.
focus is on, like, I got to generate this outcome, and we place our identity in that outcome or our worth in that outcome, then we're placing our identity and worth in places that we can't necessarily control.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, Saturday, like, if whatever it takes, I'm going to finish 50 miles. But I'd have to break an ankle or something, then that might be something out of my control if I have to
Right.
crawl 45 miles. So
Yeah.
there's always things outside of our control when it comes to outcome goals.
Right. Right. And that's a really great point. Whenever somebody comes to me and says, well, my goal is to be number one for the year in my category, right? Or to be top 5 or top 3 or, something like that. And it's a competitive thing. I think it's a beautiful goal, right? To maybe have like an intention. And also, the only thing you can control is, you putting one foot in front of another for yourself, right? And you can't necessarily control who you're competing against. And, maybe someone just has like a big outlier performance and all of a sudden they beat you, but your self-worth and your confidence is down, even though, you hit your outcome, So it's more about like measuring yourself against who you were yesterday than anything else is kind of what I'm hearing you saying. And, that's really where your self-worth comes from. So, you're running 50 miles. You've trained people to run 100 miles. You said you're training someone. You told me before the show you're training someone to do the triple crown of 200 miles, or I'm not sure if I'm getting that right. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially like several 200-mile races back to back. When you're out there, man, the longest I've run is a half marathon. When you're out there and you're running, 50 miles, or you're training someone to run 100 miles or 200 miles at a time, what's going through your head, and how do you just make sure that you don't give up? Because, I was sore after 13.1 miles. So, I can't imagine what it's like after 50 or 100. Walk us through, like, what is the mental talk and the mental game that you're playing as you're going through this?
Absolutely. And it's really what drives me, like, so much to ultra running is the mental component. And that's like a main variable, and thing that is so different than road running, track. And yes, there's a mental component there because, hey, those guys suffer when you're running that hard and that certain percentage of a VO2 max or max effort. That still hurts. But in ultra running, it's just completely different. And so the mental component is really what drives me to it. It's fascinating, the psychology that goes into that. And so really what it comes down to is purpose and meaning, and the ability to get emotionally engaged with the goal that you're chasing. And if we are emotionally engaged with, like, this is my identity and I'm the type of person that can persevere and endure whatever distance I'm set out to running, then we can generate the necessary emotions to take the appropriate actions. And so really it starts, the mental training starts the day I start working with an athlete. And we construct purpose statements, just a running mission statement, a very simple declaration of I run because. And for me, I talked just a few minutes ago about the growth process, and then also it gives me a platform to inspire and to lift other people up. And so when people can actually like articulate it and put it down on paper, and then have it in front of them on a daily basis to emotionally engage with that, and then have it there as a resource when they really go into the sufferfest, then it can dig them out of some really dark places. As soon as we become emotionally absent and disengaged with whatever we're trying to accomplish, that's when inconsistency happens. That's when discipline disappears. And so we have to have the ability to generate motivation on command. Whenever it's lacking, whenever motivation fleets and it's gone, we have to be able to say, you know what? I have the power, like a power plant. I can generate motivation and positive energy whenever I want to. And that's what I want my ultra runners to do, is I want them to be able to generate that energy when the training's hard, when it's 4 a.m. in the morning and it's pouring rain and it's cold. They don't want to get out there for a run or run 6 hours on the weekend, or whenever they're in the middle of a race. We have to tap into that emotion, because that's like the best fuel source that we can use. So that's really where it starts. From there, it's all about building a support network. It's about surrounding yourself with the right people that support you, that encourage you, that don't serve obstacles. Now, that's really challenging if you've got a large family or a work environment that isn't necessarily conducive to training for hours on end. But that's where, as our goals and our dreams, if they're important enough to us, we have to be able to articulate that vision and recruit the people that love us to be on our team and support us in that endeavor. And we also have to, at the same time, have empathy and understand, their perspective and, their needs, and be able to meet those as well. But the better that we can do to create the village of support people that can support us, better success that I see in athletes that are going for these types of events.
Yeah.
And then just the mental strategies, if we were to get down into the weeds, just being able to really be able to master their mindset in the moment. And I did a lot of studying within, and still do, cognitive behavior theory, and that's kind of where I base all of my principles and methods when it comes to mental strategies. And so it starts with just recognizing circumstances for what they are. And this is so applicable to like anything we do in life, that how we interact in our relationships, how we interact in the workplace or in our business, or if we're out running 200 miles. And circumstances are things that are black and white. We can't debate them. They're fact. They just are what they are. So we all have circumstances in our life. We have no control over them. The next part of that process is thoughts, because we formulate thoughts, opinions. These are things that can be described usually in a couple sentences. We catch ourselves in our thoughts that we have about these circumstances. They're not always factual. Like, frankly, we can have very poor thinking at times. And then those thoughts, whether either positive or negative thoughts, will always lead to a feeling or an emotion. And this is when I talked a little bit earlier about how we can generate motivation on purpose. We know how to influence this process, this cognitive behavior. We can have positive thoughts that will lead to positive emotions and feelings, and negative thoughts will lead to those negative emotions and feelings. But the emotions, the feelings, those are extremely important, because our actions, or the lack thereof, is the byproduct of how we feel in that given moment. And so it's really important to be able to harness and to be able to generate the proper emotions that we need to take the actions that are congruent with who we are as people. Results are just a byproduct of that whole process. Like, what actions do we take or do we not take? Well, we're either going to get results or we're not. And the more that we have the ability to master that, Like all that goes right here in between our ears. Like if we can master that, we can influence our results. We can influence outcomes, and we can do things intentionally instead of falling victim to our circumstances.
Love that, man. Circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, right? And that leads to results. So if you're playing along at home, that's circumstances leads to thoughts, thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, actions lead to results. And another word, what's another word for results? Circumstances, like different circumstances, right? And so what's interesting is
creating your own life.
Yeah, you can create your own like positive feedback loop, right? And I'm sure those of you listening can think of times where you've created like this really nice positive feedback loop. You know, you chose to have certain thoughts that lead to certain feelings, that led to certain actions, that led to change circumstances that were really good for you. And I'm sure all of us listening can also think back to times where we created a negative feedback loop. And it's like, why are these results the way they are? Well, we have to reflect back on ourselves and look at, well, what thoughts actually started? What was the beginning of this cycle? It was probably something negative that I chose to interpret rather than something else, right? So yeah, I really love that, man.
And the very first place we want to start is just, we have to get to a point where we say, okay, I'm going to start observing my thoughts. Like, so if you're listening right now, watching this, and you say, hey, I want to take control of my mind, the first step is to start observing your thoughts. And just recognize them. Like, okay, I'm thinking this in several sentences. These are the thoughts playing out in my head. Why do I choose to think that? And then point to like, okay, well, that thought led to this emotion, and emotions are described in one word. We're sad, we're happy, we're angry, we're motivated. So that's a vibration in our body described in one word. So those thoughts lead to that, and we need to understand where our emotions come from. So that's the first step, is to be an observer, to sit in that emotion and sit with those thoughts and just face them and try to understand them. Because if we're not willing to sit in an emotion, if we're just saying like, you know what, I'm not willing to be sad, and so I'm just gonna go distract myself. That's a version. That's like that's not gonna serve you well, because you'll never get to the root issue as to why you continually feel sad over and over and over again. So you gotta figure out why. Why are you thinking that way, and why is it leading to that emotion? At that point in time, once you start to figure those things out, and you start to be able to like step outside your body and observe your mind, you can move from thought observer to thought director. And that's really the place we want to be. And that's really where I want my ultra runners, and they're running 100 miles. I want them to have the ability to direct their thoughts in the direction that they need to go, to be congruent with the actions they want to take. And so if we want certain results, well, we have to make sure that our thoughts align with those results. And so we have to be able to direct them. So what are some ways that we can direct our thoughts? We can create affirmations for ourselves. We can, they have to be true affirmations that we actually believe, that we know are strengths for us. And just consistent, like being in front of our goals on a regular basis. That's another form of affirmation, is reading our goals out loud regularly. All those things direct our thoughts towards a creative space. Our imagination goes in one of two places. It's either going to go to creativity, or it's going to go to a place of worry and anxiety. And so we have to direct our imagination, our thoughts, to go to a place of creativity, solutions, goals, affirmations, the future, who we are, our identity. So observer to director.
That's awesome, man. We're doing this 75-day challenge, 75 episodes in 75 days with the final 75 days of the year. We're like 10, 12 days in or so. And it's amazing, Cliff. I mean, every single person essentially that we've had as a guest, as well as, myself and my co-host, Mike Abramowitz, every single person has brought up observing your thoughts. It's just like fascinating to me that that's a pattern of all these successful people. Becoming, the observer is like step one. And I also love that you took it one step further from observer to director, writing down affirmations, repeating them to yourself, being aware of your goals, setting your intentions, right? And then that way you're focused on what you want rather than what you don't want. So I think that's really, really good. I'm going to circle back to something you said about network. And and like having a support group. Because what's interesting that we haven't touched on just yet is like you are an ultra marathon runner, but also your wife is a 3-time triathlete, right? Like she's, also really huge into this space. Ironman, sorry. So she runs Ironman. It's like, she's one of the only female Ironman trainers in the country, as far as I understand. And you guys are both in this world. And that means sometimes you got to go on, 6-hour runs, 8-hour runs, 10-hour runs or whatever. How does one go about, let's say they want to get healthy, but they have a family, or they want to get healthy, but they have a business to run. And it's like, how does someone actually go about creating that time and negotiating that space, whether it's with business partners or it's with a spouse or with someone else in their lives? And how can they actually figure out a way to do that properly?
Yeah, great question. It comes down to a matter of prioritization. How well can you prioritize? And having a lot of clarity around where does that fit in your top 5 priorities. And if it's not even in the discussion of some of the most important things in your life, then just gonna have to adjust your expectations. That's what I tell people all the time. Okay, you want a six pack, but you're not willing to put in the work, then adjust your expectations. Like you can continue to eat the cheeseburgers and still be healthy, and be balanced, but you'll have to let go of some extreme goals. So really understanding like what does fitness mean to you? What does a healthy lifestyle mean to you? And then how does that fit into your priorities on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? Having that conversation with the important people in your life and being able to articulate, this is important to me because of this, and explain why it's important. Recruit those people to be in your support circle, in your support network, and make sure that it takes or that it gets a good look into your daily schedule. And so, we work in similar spaces, and with time management, if it doesn't get on the calendar, it's likely not to happen. And so, usually I tell people, once they figure out where it's at on their priority list, to be able to actually schedule it and fill in the calendar so that we know that all we have to do is show up. Because if it's just this mythical thing out there that needs to get plugged in at some point, and we don't actually allocate time for that activity, it's not going to happen, and
right.
We'll continue to get towards the bottom of the to-do list.
Totally. Put it in your calendar so all you have to do is show up. That's good advice, whether it's fitness or it's an important business task or a morning routine or whatever. So that's awesome. I feel like a lot of people listening, Cliff, they are healthy or they want to be healthy. There's a general health awareness in my community that, taking care of your energy is really important. And also probably most people listening aren't ultra marathon runners, right? Maybe they run a marathon before or something like that, but their main focus isn't trying to figure out how to run 200 miles. Although you may inspire a few folks. I think that'd be pretty cool if you did. And if you're out there listening, definitely look Cliff up and check him out if you guys want to learn how to do that more. I feel like the majority of folks are kind of in that, hey, I want to be healthy, and also, I want to look good, I want to feel good. But where do I even start? One of the things that I've noticed is like there's just been this boom of fitness influencers in the space, and everybody, is an expert across the board. And, sometimes one expert will tell you one thing, another expert will tell you something else. What are the most common myths or misconceptions that you're noticing in the fitness space today for kind of like the average person out there who wants to be fit and wants to be healthy and take care of themselves, but is not sure exactly who to trust and where to turn?
Yeah. So great observation there. There is a lot of conflicting information, particularly in this space, as it relates to, I would say probably in the nutrition field, which I'm actually not an expert in myself, although I do have a good amount of knowledge. And so my wife Patty is an expert in that space and works with people one-on-one within nutrition. But I would say that's probably where we see the biggest and the most amount of myths. And I also want to point out that there's usually more than one path. Like, there isn't just like, okay, this is the only way to achieve health. This is the only way to get fit. And so it's highly individual. And so, yeah, we do have a lot of, years and years and years worth of research and science and some basic core principles that we need to adhere to. And I do think there's a lot of things right now that have kind of misconstrued a lot of that science. I'm particularly looking at like the keto community. If I'm just going to call somebody out, I'll do it.
Sure. I've tried it, but yeah, what do you see there?
My main issue with keto is that it's just frankly not sustainable for 99.9% of the population. And so if you're that 0.01% and it works for you and you're happy and you love eating that way, then and you feel like you can eat that way for the rest of your entire life, then that's great. But the rest of us, we like our carbs, and that's okay. And the science actually supports that there's a lot of good health benefits to, good sources of carbohydrates. In fact, we're taking a lot easier approach to the same end goal. And that's kind of my main thing is like, we know there's multiple paths. Let's do what we enjoy. Let's do what's sustainable, because if you're going to take the hardest route possible, then you're really going to decrease your chances of success. And so if we know that more than one way works, and we know that science really supports the more traditional method, tweak it and do what's for you and do what you feel good within eating, and then make sure that the science aligns with it and the core principles align with it. So some basic things is like, you got to eat fruits and vegetables. Mom was right all these years, right? There was something to that. There's so many micronutrients that we don't take into account in our diets when we're absent of all the colors available to us in our food. Don't overeat. Just a simple matter of eat until you're content, and don't look at food as a source to fulfill you emotionally. Food is a source to fulfill you physiologically. It's an energy source, and that's one of the main things I work with my athletes on is like, hey, if you want to be an athlete, then you have to look at food from an athletic perspective, and food is your fuel. It's your way to perform. It's your way to recover. But I see too frequently people using it as an emotional fuel source and having a bad relationship with it. So I guess my main message there, because like I said, I'm not an expert within nutrition, but I see a lot of mistakes of people just way overcomplicating it and setting themselves up for failure, beating themselves up, and then getting into this yo-yo effect of like, okay, I'm hardcore, I'm doing good, I'm losing weight, I'm strict and rigid on this miserable diet. And then all of a sudden, like, hey, it's my son's birthday and I had a piece of cake and I just completely fell off the wagon. And then now I went into this 3 or 4 week cycle of eating whatever I want, put all the weight back on. Okay, it's time to get serious again. And that doesn't have to be the path. We can choose a more sustainable path that's more balanced, that's more enjoyable, and still be able to reach the goals. So that's probably on the nutrition front. I guess, on the fitness side of things, man, there's so many different vehicles. I choose Ultramarathon. Maybe that's not the most healthiest, actually. If someone's looking to lose weight, I would never tell them, like, you need to get into ultra running. In fact, if someone's looking to lose weight or general health, I wouldn't even tell them that they need to run. There's better methods of weight loss and producing good aesthetics than running. The best thing you can do is to get in the gym 3-4 days a week, to really focus on your nutrition. Hey, that's the things I love about being an ultra athlete is that I get to consume a ridiculous amount of calories. I get to eat an entire pizza several nights a week. There
you go. Training, that's awesome.
Can do that, and and it'd be fine. But yeah, if their goals, I think people have to take into consideration of their goals, and if your goals are weight loss, how your body looks, um, don't spend all of your time running or doing cardio. Like you're gonna have to, like, muscle burns fat, and that's why we need to lift weights, and if we want to change our body, we have to pick up some weights and really challenge ourselves in that regard.
Yeah, totally, totally. By the way, I think your video is frozen. Just a heads up. So I kind of
Okay.
cut back.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything you can do there, but your audio is coming through fine, but the video is just frozen. So, um, and we'll keep rolling with it here though. So one thing that came up for me was this idea of like technology. I see a lot of trainers using technology these days, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on like the proper use of technology. If there's like a particular tool or set of tools that you like to use in training, and what sort of analytics are you even looking for from this technology? Like, what are the best things for people to look out for?
Yeah, so what I'm looking at may not be applicable to general health and fitness, but I do think overall technology is just an amazing tool that we have available to us that can provide a lot of good insight into the workload that we're doing on a daily basis. Calorie counters, step counters, those things like that. Sure, there's value to that. Are they 100% accurate? No, but it still gives us a baseline, and it still gives us some targets that we can work towards, and an idea of kind of staying within lines per se. On the training side of my world, I look at a lot of analytics. I look at stress loads for my athletes, both on a macro level and a micro level. I look at things such as pace and distance. I look at heart rate, and even some more emerging technology is like power meters, and that's really common in the cycling world.
Right.
But within running now, we actually have to be able to measure like how much power output we're doing in running. It's like force that we apply, and so kind of more of a mechanical perspective. And that's a really good way to track stress and to also prescribe efforts to people. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the best feedback that I get is from my athletes, and it's a simple, "Hey, how are you feeling? How did those intervals feel? Like, the effort required was a 10 out of 10. How did that feel, and how are you recovering?" And that's probably the most important piece of data or analytics I have to observe is how people are feeling. So I just would encourage everybody to use the technology, but also understand there's variables, to understand that there's some gray areas, that everything, heart rate monitors, they're not perfect. They're not going to give you 100% accuracy. And to be able to use all that stuff in conjunction with being in tune with your body. And if you're tired, then rest. If you're not getting enough sleep, you might need to adjust your workout the following day. A really important training strategy in exercise science is overload and recovery. And so what we want to do, whether we're in the gym lifting weights or if we're out running all the miles, is we're going to overload our system or overload a muscle. So if we think about that in the gym, we're going to, if we do bench press, we overload with reps and weight through, the applied chest. And then we need adequate time to recover from that. So that's why we don't go into the gym and do bench press every single day, because we actually get stronger whenever we're recovering. That's whenever we actually get fitter. That's when we get stronger. And so if we're going in and we're just hammering it out every single day and we don't take time to recover, we're not going to see the progression that we need in our training, and we're going to sabotage our results. And the cool thing is, because I love to make application, to life, it's similar in life. We have to be able to step back from the daily stress if we look at stress as like conflict can be a really good thing. It's a stress, and it produces a result, but we have to be able to recover from that stress. We have to be able to resolve that conflict if we want to actually reap the benefits of it. And so too many times we're either stressed out all the time, or in the gym we're just hitting it hard all the time, and then we don't dedicate time and space to recharge and recover. Our efforts are not being optimized.
Totally. I love that. For those of you listening and you want to do some more research on this, the process of stressing something and then that is going to expand your capacity for load in the future. It's called the hormetic process. And if I expose myself to really extreme heats or really extreme cold, or a 50-mile run or whatever, assuming that I've actually can ramp into that, I wouldn't want to go into Antarctica today, but if I gradually learned how to expose myself to cold through cold showers and then ice baths and then something extremely cold, well, then of course I'm adapting physiologically, right? There's like a process through which the system actually grows stronger through the stress, right? And of course that applies to fitness, but it also applies to your life. It applies to your mental capacity. How often are you stretching your mind? How often are you challenging yourself? How often are you looking for a way to think bigger about something and challenging yourself to push yourself? And I think that is one of the reasons you're on the show, is because one of the ideas of being better than rich is to constantly push yourself. You have to constantly be pushing yourself if you want to become better than rich in life. Otherwise, you're going to be settling at some level or another. So this has been fun, man.
Progression principle.
Say that again.
I was just gonna say we call that the progression principle. Where, we do need to apply stress. We need to overload, and then we need to recover from it. But over time, on a more macro level, we have to progress, and training has to continue to get harder and harder and harder. Because if it doesn't get harder, we're not going to continue to create new adaptations, and we're not going to continue to get fitter. So what you just said, absolutely spot on. We see that with an exercise science as well.
Awesome. Hey man, this has been super fun. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of great nuggets here. I'm sure our audience did as well. Where can people find you and learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the best place to connect with me is on Instagram. Handle is at Coach Cliff Pittman. Also really active on Facebook as well. And then my website is www.f2ecoaching.com. F2E stands for Fit to Endure. So those are the best three places. You can subscribe to a weekly newsletter. We've got group coaching, one-on-one coaching, a lot of cool stuff coming out in the future. And I do partner with my wife in this Fit to Endure coaching, as well as she works with a lot of women in nutrition and triathlon, and then also just within general health coaching is one of her strengths as well.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. We'll have to do a round 2 sometime and maybe talk family and your time in the military. There's so many things that we didn't really have the time to scratch the surface on, but check Cliff out, check out Fit to Endure. These guys are true professionals and really know what's up. And yeah, man, I know I can't see you right now on the video, but I really, really, really want to wish you, I was going to say break a leg. I'm from the acting world. But that's probably not the best thing to say to an ultramarathon runner. So I'll say good luck. Yes. Good luck out there on this race, man. Super proud of you, and congrats on all your success. Thanks again.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate you. Truly honored to be on here, and look forward to doing it again.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. And remember to leave today better than you found it. See you next time.